My birthday. I turned blah-de-blah years old. All right, 56. I can't believe that I've been on this earth for the better part of 6 decades. The 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the first decade of the 2000s. So as I look back, I thought I would invite you to come along a trip down memory lane by the decades. Now, for those of you who know me well, you know that I have some abiding passions in my life. My wife and family, Cardinal baseball, and politics. So I thought we would take that trip down memory lane, looking at the decades through those two prisms, Cardinal baseball and politics. Are you ready? All right, here we go. The 1950s, Dwight Eisenhower was president. Cardinals, not very competitive, even though they had one of the best players in baseball in Stan Musial. The 60s picked up for the Cardinals. They won the World Series in 1964. They beat the New York Yankees. A highlight of that World Series was Kenny Boyer hitting a grand slam home run in Game 3 to beat the Yankees. Now, little did I know that 10 years later, I would be playing high school baseball with his son, David, at Herman High School. So I can credibly say that I played baseball in front of Major League Baseball scouts. They weren't there to see me. They were there to see Dave. And he was drafted into the Cardinals system. He knocked around baseball in the minor leagues for a couple of years before he decided that was not in his future. Cardinals won the World Series in 1967 against the Boston Red Sox, then lost the World Series the following year, 1968, to the Detroit Tigers. Politically, the decade began with John F. Kennedy being elected president. He was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. Now, how many of you in this room remember that day? All right, come on now, admit it. There we go. I was in a one-room schoolhouse in Berger, Missouri. I was in first grade. A neighbor lady came by and announced that the president had been shot. I went home, and on our black and white television set, I saw Air Force One glide into Washington, D.C. I saw them carefully remove the casket from the plane. I saw Jackie Kennedy still wearing her blood-stained dress, and Lyndon Johnson making his first remarks to the country as President of the United States. 6 years old, and I still remember that. Johnson was president through 1968 when Richard Nixon was elected president. He was re-elected in 1972 by a landslide. But it wasn't too long after that when we started hearing the word Watergate. Richard Nixon is the only president I know who had to admit to the country, I am not a crook. And it was only a few months later that he stepped down as president and was succeeded by Gerald Ford, and then Jimmy Carter won the election in 1976. The 70s were an evil decade for the Cardinals. They didn't even sniff postseason play. The highlight in 1974, Lou Brock setting the record for stolen bases in a single season with 117. The 1980s were exciting. I was news director for the campus radio station in Warrensburg, Missouri. So I had the chance to cover the presidential candidates as they came through Kansas City. So I saw Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, Walter Mondale, George H.W. Bush. And in fact, one of the reports I filed was picked up by National Public Radio. And they announced me this report in this fashion. And now reporting from member station KCMW in Warrensburg, Missouri, Lorell L. Well, you can't have everything. Cardinals won the World Series in 1982 against the Milwaukee Brewers. In 1985, they lost the World Series to some insignificant team. Oh yeah, that was the Royals. 1987, the Cardinals lost the World Series to the Minnesota Twins. So we move into the 90s, and that was the decade of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. And the Cardinals only in the playoffs 1 year in 1996 when Tony La Russa started at the helm for the Cardinals. In the first decade of the 2000s, it was 9/11 and George Bush. and Barack Obama, the first president, black man to be elected president of the United States at the end of that decade. And the Cardinals, in the first decade of the 2000s, did great. They had 7 playoff appearances, went through the World Series twice, and won in 2006. So that's our trip down memory lane. Thanks for coming along. And maybe in 4 years, who knows, I might be giving this very same speech when I turn 60. This is Toastmaster.